Hi, everyone. Okay, so I am doing this spontaneously. I was inspired to do this video because of my friend Angelica Christi. I'm going to be posting in within this caption her YouTube channel. She and I speak a lot about the same topics, projections, spirituality, uh, anything under the umbrella of personal development. We're also both involved or have been for many years in a system called human design. And it was really interesting because she and I were talking this morning, going back and forth. She's actually in Italy right now visiting family. And we were talking about projections, which, as all of you know, I also address in many of my videos. I had been reflecting quite a bit on some experiences that I've had and the ones that are most recent. And I think it's really important to bring in some personal experience so that some of you who are either studying different spirituality or healing modalities in general, or just interested in psychology, many times it's you can study, like I said in my last video, you can study and read all these concepts and everything, but to bring it in and practice it on a daily basis, we have all the tools that we need. And anyway, she and I are just so aligned. And so let me begin, because I would like to talk about more of these projections. And I like what she says in her video. She begins by actually acknowledging that she and I were talking, and we were talking about, she's talking about projections, and she's saying, at some point, it doesn't matter whether, you know, we're doing it or, the other person is doing it. Because basically, these are all teachable moments as you grow in your evolution as a person with your personal development. As I was stating in my last video, I was sort of talking about the dark night of the soul, trying to bring these abstract concepts into everyday life and what that looks like, and that it's not always Disneyland. A lot of people like to think, oh, I'm so enlightened and I'm so this and I don't have any problems and so forth. I will begin with an experience that is very much or resembles Angelica's experiences, and we've actually talked personally, so I know that she'll relate to this, and I'm sure many of you may relate to this as well. And it ties in also with any kind of relationship, whether it's a friendship or intimate relationships. Some of you now know that when I talk about relationships, I'm not speaking just about sexual, intimate relationships. I'm speaking about anybody that we relate to and that we are dealing with on a daily basis, whether it's social media and or physically. Every time that we have people in our life, it's inevitable that we are going to have some irritation, something that they say, that we say, that rubs us the wrong way. When I was practicing Buddhism, the sensei, the teacher of the organization, would use the analogy that we're all like boiling potatoes. And actually, I did a video. It's within this YouTube channel about boiling potatoes. And he would always say that the best way to really clean yourself, right? That was an analogy, is using the example of the potatoes, right? And so when we are interacting with other people, it's quite inevitable to encounter some form of conflict or some form of misunderstanding. This is so key to any relationship that we're in. And to be able to have that flexibility that we are going to project on each other. And the important thing is to keep each other accountable if possible. I realize that what I'm speaking of is perhaps with humanity, we're not quite there yet, whereas we can really get the collective. And that's why Angelica and I are trying to create these videos to be able to bring this discussion in the forefront. I mean, we're starting to see, and I've got to say this, so I'm going off on a tangent here. We're starting to see this in the political realm as well. And there are a lot of people out there now that are social critics. And I consider myself actually one of those people, even though I'm not, I'm somebody who likes to critique and to look at different things and question and challenge. This is the way that we grow. Talking about the pink elephant in the room, talking about things that are taboo. So we're starting to see that even in this platform of YouTube, where there's a lot of intellectual people that are so outside the box, that are not mainstream media, that are not biased, but really picking apart concepts and philosophies. And is this true? And doing the Byron Katie, is this true? And I love that. That's I feel like that really is definitely part of my way of bringing out the way I see things and the way I experience them. And it might not be digestible for everyone. I'll leave that for Angelica at one point, because we're going to be doing an interview, hopefully soon, or a recorded conversation about these kind of things. So I just wanted to say, we're seeing that in the political realm, where people are really coming out, right? The stereotypes of African Americans or Latinos or people that are supposed to be voting a certain way, they're not, and they're really coming out and they're bringing such great material forward. Right? They're having those uncomfortable discussions. And so I think Angelica and I are kind of one of those people. We're sort of bringing out personal development and bringing these videos to say we're here, we're listening, we want to improve. In order for us to evolve, it's not just intellectually with critical thinking, which is important, but also how can we really embody the concepts that many people are reading about. What is it to be authentic? How can we be in our integrity? How can we be flexible, but yet at the same time own ourselves, be responsible, be accountable in a world that can be self-entitled at times, that can be the victim, and acknowledging our humanness as well, acknowledging that I too can sometimes fall into feeling like I'm a victim, right? So it's not about being in that, it's staying in that mentality. And so now I'm coming to the part of this video where we're talking about projections. So it's about bringing what you think about another person, or if you need to critique it, you can still do it in a way where it's not like super sugarcoating things in a way and apologizing and, oh, I'm sorry, but I need to, but it's also being able to be flexible. Just because Angelica teaches, just because I teach, doesn't mean that we're not learning. We're constantly learning. I'm constantly learning. And so I'll share an experience with you. It happened where a kind of a new friend of mine, somebody that I've met in the last several months, and I were having sort of a conversation, and we were text messaging, and she had brought something up to my attention, and we've worked together before, so we know each other enough to know that we're pretty thick-skinned, and that if we need to say something, that we will, and well, whatever. If there's a little bit of a trigger, it's okay. We'll work it out. Well, it so happened that there was something that was said about me with this friend, and well, actually, she brought something to my attention, and I thought, everything else resonates, but not this particular thing. And it was just a matter of fact. It wasn't said in a mean way, or I wasn't being snarky or anything like that. I just was being blunt. This doesn't resonate. She, by the way, has in the past also said to me, no, that doesn't resonate with me, or whatever. So you get the gist of this conversation. So, as soon as I said that this particular, her insight didn't really, if you would call it insight, I don't know, I'm just calling it for that. What she brought to the table just didn't resonate with me. She came back and she said, well, oh my God, you're being this and that. kind of thing. And I'm being a little bit vague because I really don't want to get into the specifics, right? But she was basically labeling me. And somehow it hit me the wrong way. Not because I wasn't willing, and in fact, I told her that I'm not unwilling to take a look at this. And this is what Angelica's saying in her video about projections. It's not as though I wasn't willing to take a look at that. But it was sort of, then there was another comment, it was like the you. And so then I said, this is interesting because I am getting a little triggered. I am a little, I already have a measure. I know when there's a potential misunderstanding. So I said, I'm calling you because this text messaging and, is not a proficient way of, a good way, always efficient way of communication. And when I was on the phone with her, I was speaking and I consciously wanted to bring out that I wasn't angry with her because I truly wasn't angry with her. I was irritated at her insistence that I was what she labeled me. It hit me the wrong way. And so what I said to her was, why don't you first tell me, here's the question, and this is key. What is your definition of this label so that I can understand why I was being called that? And she kind of fumbled and I said, well, here, let me help you. Let me tell you how I define that label. One of them was stubborn, for example, which is not anything big. I mean, yeah, I mean, stubborn is not a dirty word by all means, but in the context, it hit me a certain way because we've worked together before. And she knows, as the people who know me very well, I'm very flexible. If I wasn't, I wouldn't have been able to do the changes in my life that I have. And I'm always willing to entertain, even when something's uncomfortable. That's my job. I used to call myself the Grim Reaper of personal development because I'm not married to a particular, it's like, okay, you stayed in observation, let me pull back and let me see. And this is kind of what Angelica is talking about as well in her video. So in my story, my friend was probably triggered and didn't realize it because she kept on saying, I mean, she did say, well, I didn't, that's not what I meant, but she wouldn't quantify it. She didn't quite. And what ended up happening was she kept on telling me, well, you need to work on it. And then all of a sudden it became you need to work on it. It just, and I was listening and then I responded with, I'm just trying to understand. I said, because this has happened before to me, where how is it, when someone tells me, Sandra, that doesn't really resonate with me, or I'm not quite sure, let me think about it. Because that's what I was doing. When she labeled me a certain, say, well, that just because something doesn't resonate with me doesn't mean that I'm completely not going to reflect on this. And so I wanted to validate even her, it wasn't like I was making great effort. I just believe that it's good to say, okay, let me entertain that. But when you're trying to shove something down my throat and trying to tell me something like, for example, this is the way you are, it's like, it just didn't jive with me. And I was unable to, we weren't shouting or anything like that, but there was no, and this is the point I want to get to with projections, there was no compromise. There was no meeting halfway. There wasn't like, okay, that's interesting. Or even just simply say, you know what, now I'm getting a little triggered. Let's take a break, or let me look at this, or maybe we can, because I do faster EFT and EFT. It wasn't, and she, wasn't like, okay, well, let's tap together, or, and I know this person isn't mean. This video is not about vilifying anyone. It's more about how can we get better and more clear with our communication. And I'm really big on conflict resolution. And I'm proud of myself because I didn't back out on something, but at the same time, I wanted clarification that shows that I care about myself. But to be honest with you, it's a demonstration that I care about her as well, and that I care about our friendship. And I hope that makes sense when someone does want to get clear. I didn't want to get clear because I wanted to make her wrong. There's a distinction there. It was about wanting to get clear for the both of us so that we can challenge ourselves on projections, so that we can understand what that means. I mean, when someone tells you that doesn't resonate with me, you don't have to label that person as being stubborn or stupid or anything. They just simply, it's not necessary. Yeah. So we don't want to, as Angelica says as well in her video, and I've said this as well, because this is part of the shadow, is that we don't want to deny or push away parts of ourselves. I was more than happy to entertain, and I did, and I acknowledged it in this conversation with this person, that, yeah, okay, I might be a little triggered. But trigger, by the way, doesn't mean that you have to get all riled up, and be this dramatic soap opera queen or king. It just means that that something inside of you was provoked. And I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to understand it in myself. But when the other individual is unwilling to stop and look at it and want to, that speaks volumes as well as to where we are in our evolution. And this is key point, because when we are in relationship with people, they are going to pull things from us that we don't like about them or about ourselves. And we're going to do the same for them, and it's just part of life. So when I hear people say, I only want to be around people that are completely, I would imagine for me, what that means being aligned would be somebody like Angelica, somebody who I can be extremely transparent with, and say, there might be a point where she might say something to me or I might say something to her, but I have the confidence that whatever that is we can move through that. And I think this is extremely important when it comes to projections. The second thing about projections, that there are a lot of misunderstandings, and it's key, because if you think about it, projections are perceptions, and they're the way we view things through our lenses. And just because we see something, just because we hear something, just like my friend, I'm sure she didn't mean it to be mean or anything. I'm positive of that. In fact, I can put my hand on fire that she didn't mean it. What I found interesting, however, was the way it was handled later. It was almost like, instead of just going, yeah, I really didn't mean it, or, kind of laugh it off a little bit, and then help us both to try to look at it. Isn't this interesting? I wouldn't do this to you for these reasons, type of thing. But that was unavailable, quite frankly. And so what I'd like to share with you is something extremely important. And that is that this is what I learned. For some reason, I guess I didn't quite understand it, or because of my conditioning and my culture and my generation maybe. whatever that means, all of it put together, so it's everything is in the stew pot, is that I don't think our focus necessarily should be on just superficially aligning ourselves with who we think, or even what we think is thinking like us. I don't know if that makes sense. That might not make too much sense. But focus on, there's a potential that conflict is going to be there. There's definitely going to be projections. And what can I do as an individual to become aware of that, to overcome those things? And it does require us to do inner work in ourselves, to really take a look at ourselves on a very deep level and take up the opportunity with all the people that we engage with, all the people that are our friends. It doesn't mean that you won't get irritated. It doesn't mean that you're not entitled to even feel what you feel. But our feelings aren't always the truth. And that is my invitation to all of you, is to be able to take a look at it on a deeper level when we are interacting with people. And I realize as well, and this used to happen to me as well years ago, it's hard to sometimes admit that we said a faux pas, that, or, that gaffe didn't really sit very well with people. I mean, I've stuck my foot in my mouth so many times. Or maybe I didn't say things very clear. I've caught myself later. I thought, oh, okay. Or I've even misinterpreted things. Somebody said one thing and it was just like, oh my God. And then I had to pull back and say, oh no, that's not what they meant. You see, and how are we going to improve ourselves and evolve in our consciousness and our awareness if we are defensive? It's impossible. And so without boasting, I did the correct thing, and this is what I do. And what I do is I call people. I say, I want to have a conversation with you because we need to get over this. This is really interesting to me because a lot of people, they avoid that phone call. And not in this particular scenario, but I have noticed, I'm smiling because I'm thinking like, this is interesting, because it shows the willingness on my part to do that. And that's what you need to look out for. Are people willing? Angelica gives some really good, painful kind of experiences of rejection and people just like unfriending her on Facebook because they interpreted, and they didn't give her an opportunity to say, okay, well, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but what did I say? And let's talk it out, right? So there's an immaturity on people who don't want to resolve conflict. And it doesn't matter if it's fear, or if it's just they've had bad experience. It doesn't matter what it is, it's just not a mature, it's immature in that sense. And so I'll leave you all with that. I hope that this has been helpful. I'm going to be putting Angelica's YouTube channel in my caption, and please be welcome to follow her. I'm sure she'll be more than happy. And okay, hope this has been helpful. Take care.